I was 22 years old when I came to prison.
I was 30 years old when I went to prison.
I was at the age of 19. I had just turned 19.
Hi, I'm Chris, and I help life-sentenced men transition from institutionalized prison life back into society. Every one of our men has already served 25 to 45 years in prison. I serve on the board of the Corrections Transition Program at Everglades Correctional Institution in Miami, Florida. I teach these men life skills and how to speak, listen, and think, so when they get paroled, they become assets to their communities rather than liabilities of the state. Welcome to Men Going Home. I'm Chris Wolfe, and we've got another great show for you today because we are the only show that brings you access to a segment of society very few people know anything about. Men who have spent more than 30, 35, and even 40 years in prison. We'll talk to them about their crimes, their life in prison, and what their transition back into the free world was like after all those years. Now, before we welcome today's special guest, please welcome my good friend and co-host of this show, Andy Korge. Andy, welcome.
Hey, good afternoon, Chris. Good to be here. Very excited about meeting our new guest this week and finding out a little bit about his story. And, you know, bear in mind, too, anybody wants to listen to this show, you can listen to the podcast on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Andy, last week's guest, Kenneth Hodge. What was your take on Kenneth?
Well, I took a lot away from Kenneth in that interview. It was really very revealing for me. A couple things. First off, he goes back to jail after bouncing a $60 check when he's on parole. And I guess that what that told me is, man, that is one strong contract, parole contract that you have. And we'll talk today with our guest about a little bit about that. But I don't know, it seems a little ridiculous to me.
A little too strict.
Yeah. I sending someone back to jail 28 years, he bounced a $60 check. I mean, that was the most expensive $60 check probably he ever wrote.
And he didn't do it on purpose. It was an inadvertent mistake. He thought the check wouldn't be cashed. However, under the terms of parole, he violated his parole and parole was revoked and he went back to prison for 28 years.
It's a long time. But I'll tell you, the thing that I really took away from Kenneth more than anything was how his outlook on life. And I got very reflective about it afterwards because he really is enjoying his life. You know, I turned 60 last year and it was kind of a bummer to me turning 60, quite honestly, but he really is loving life at his age. I think he was maybe 67 or 66. And he's really in loving life. He's learned how to, even though he doesn't swim, he's learned how to scuba dive.
Right.
He's just gotten married. He found a love of his life. And, there is life after prison.
And Kenneth Hodge is very similar to most of the men in the program. You asked him, weren't you bitter when you did 28 years for bouncing a check and violating your parole? And he said, no. There's too much life to live to be angry. And you're right. He's enjoying life now. He's happily married. He's found the love of his life. He's scuba diving, even though he said he can't swim. Yeah. And he's enjoying life.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said. I think there's a lot to be learned. And I really took a lot away from that interview in terms of, appreciate the life you have.
Well, today's guest has a fascinating story, so let's introduce him right now. Today's special guest was raised in the Miami neighborhood of Overtown and convicted of first-degree murder in 1987 at the age of only 19. He survived 33 years in Florida's most violent prisons and was paroled on November 19th of 2019. He is here today to tell his story about his crime, his prison time, and transition to a better life. So please welcome today's guest, Troy Martin. Troy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you to be here, Andy.
Good.
Thank you for coming down.
Yes. First of all, I want to say I want to extend my condolences and apologies to my victim, Anthony Taylor, his family, all the people in society that are adversely affected. And I want to thank the Florida Commission on Offender Review, as well as Dr. Regina B. Shern, for helping me to be here in society today. Thank you.
Well said. Well said. Troy, you were actually born in Brooklyn, New York,
Yes, I lived my first 3 years there.
1967.
Yes,
And then your parents parted ways 3 years later.
yes,
Your mother had family in the Overtown neighborhood of Miami,
yes.
and she moved you at a very young age to Miami. What was that like in the early 1970s, growing up in Overtown?
Well, Overtown is actually, it was a good place. I mean, in the sense that the camaraderie with the families and my mom was able to treat you like her child and vice versa, the neighbor's mom, and was able to treat you like, you were their child. So it was in a sense, and children don't really understand poverty. So, for the most part, it wasn't bad as what one might think. Even though the economic situation was probably not the best, it was a lovable environment.
Right. And Overtown was very different back in the 60s and the 70s. Last week's guest, Kenneth Hodge, mentioned how you could walk down the street and see Sammy Davis Jr. I believe you at one time saw Muhammad Ali working out for a boxing match. Talk about that.
Right. So he used to run through the neighborhood. He was staying in the Alapata area, and he used to run through the neighborhood jogging to go to Fifth Street Gym on the beach. And the kids used to run behind him and couldn't keep up with him. This guy was amazing. Yeah, Muhammad Ali.
Now, at a relatively young age, and so you were attending the Miami-Dade County Public Schools,
Yes.
but at a relatively young age, about 14 years old, you started almost a career of stealing. Talk about that.
Well, actually it began a little earlier than that. But at 14, I was basically like, I was done with school. I dropped out of junior high school, and I decided that, I was going to make money on my own, different ways, going downtown department stores, stealing and things of this effect, hanging out basically with older guys. And one thing led to another. Eventually I began selling drugs.
But wait a minute, back up to the stealing, because the drugs came a little bit later. You were 13, 14, and so you were influenced to steal. Actually, it was a little bit of a business for you, because you were stealing from stores like McCrory, and you were selling to actual consumers on the street.
Yes.
What were you stealing, and what were you selling?
Basically anything that we could get, but sometimes it would be orders. Like when school come up, a person might say, if y'all get any barrettes for these girls' hair, bring them by here.
So you were a personal shopper.
Yeah, I mean, shopping and lifting at the same time. So, so that was basically it.
And then what if I could,
go ahead.
Was it the attraction to the money, or you just not interested in school that caused you to drop out at that point?
Yes, money. And to be honest, seeing my mom on welfare with 11 children, 6 that always resided with her, including myself, because majority of my siblings are older. I'm the 10th of 11. So it was like 4 or 5 that really rarely stayed with us, but 6 of us constantly, and seeing my mom struggle, to provide for us. We was in poverty, living on welfare. And I can say it now that she's passed, but once I got in school, she was able to go to places like the beach and clean houses and stuff like that under the table, and get income like that. So I had a sense of pride in that, my mom would cook at people's houses and clean houses. And, I just I wasn't comfortable with that, her providing for me like that, even though I, accepted what she gave me, but I didn't want to wait around for, wait on my mom to give me things.
So you were helping, that's how you raised money to help the family.
Well, no, raise money to buy the things that I wanted to purchase myself instead of waiting on her.
But you were also helping her, because were you also giving money to your mother?
No, she would never take money.
Oh, okay.
No.
Now, she was a homemaker, but then she became a registered nurse, correct?
Yes, she did.
All right. So you're stealing from stores and selling direct to consumers, but then you were also stealing, and some things went to a fence. Now, explain what a fence is and what went to a fence.
Okay, so a fence is the person that buys stolen goods, and I guess they sell them elsewhere for increase the value. So things like if we were able to go in different department stores and steal maybe a nice watch, right, a designer watch. At that time, mostly Boulevards,
Right.
and
Seiko.
his Seikos and things like that, and bring it to him downtown, and he give you half the price for it. Like if it was a $500 watch, you say, give me 300. He said, no, I'll give you 200. You mingle back and forth about it and things like that.
So when you with stealing, you also have a term called boosting. When we talk about boosting, we boost the views of this show. What is boosting?
Actually, it's just department store theft.
Okay.
Going to department stores, stealing different things, and coming out and selling it. Basically for retail in the neighborhoods. And which is a popular thing in our neighborhood.
All right. So now at age 15, you really kind of move away from stealing from stores and you really start now selling drugs.
Right.
You've dropped out of school.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom had her hands full with 6 kids.
Right.
What was her attitude on you dropping out of school?
She didn't approve of it. Absolutely. And she wanted to send me to my dad in Brooklyn, where he resided till he passed. And in fact, we used to go there every summer, but I didn't want to go there. And so I just stopped coming home.
Gotcha.
And started, doing my own thing in the streets, hanging out with older guys, staying with different friends,
Right.
And just.
So at 15, you start selling drugs, but you're working for somebody, right?
Yes.
And then a year later, you start selling drugs on your own.
Yes. Because I seen the money to be made, and instead of help somebody else get it, I decided to help myself get it.
And how much money were you? You're 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your own, narcotics business on the streets of Overtown. How much money were you making every day?
On average, $600-700.
So that's almost $5,000 a week.
Mm-hmm.
That's good money.
Mm-hmm.
At 16, you've got your own business and you're making $5,000 a week. So now at 19, you mentioned that you're going to clubs and you've got an entourage.
Mm-hmm.
Explain what your entourage does. What is their function?
To hang out and basically protect me, if you will. As you can imagine, firearms are involved now, comes with the business.
Mm-hmm.
So we just hang out and live, enjoy life, party.
How many members of the entourage were there?
6.
Are they your employees? Do you pay them every week, or do you just pay for everything you guys do?
So they are separate from the employees. Right? They are separate for the employees. I have 4 employees other than these guys that I hung out that were in my entourage and my clique.
And what were your employees? What were they supposed to do?
They would just sell the drugs.
On the street.
Yes. Yes. So we had one, what you call barn man, which distribute or sell the product. And another man was a lookout. So we had 2 shifts to do that. So it was a total 4 guys.
What kind of drugs were you selling?
Marijuana, powder cocaine, heroin, until crack came out. Then that was the biggest thing.
That was it.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned that the number one drug that people bought was marijuana, then cocaine, then heroin, then crack.
Mm-hmm.
Why was crack the 4th? You would think it was a derivative of cocaine. It was cheap. Why was that the 4th?
Well, because initially people used to freebase cocaine. It means you had to buy it in quantity, right, and cook it up yourself. But when crack came out, that was the luxury of getting it. It was already cooked up for you, and you could get it for $5 or $10 as opposed to having to go buy an ounce or a gram like in the past and cook it yourself. So it was like a convenience for the guys who smoked it, for the people who smoked it.
Were you using drugs also?
Marijuana.
You just smoked marijuana.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, marijuana. Occasionally, socially drank, beer, champagne. And when I go to the clubs, champagne.
And did you treated this as a business? You had employees. Was there a certain quota you had to make every day, or no, just whatever you made?
Right.
All right. So here we are, 1986. The past 5 years are pretty good. You're selling. You're making a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
You're spending a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
and you have your entourage. but this was a big turning point in your life because I recollect there were some guys from Opelika that came into Overtown and they were selling drugs, which normally would probably be a problem, except that one of the guys had a girlfriend who you and your crew knew, so it was cool.
Right.
All right. So talk about that.
So it was a lot being said about it, that we were soft and letting these guys come over in our neighborhood and do this, but the street they were in was on a dead end street. It was a one way. So, they weren't making a lot of money in comparison to us. So we just overlooked it. And then again, one of the girls that we knew was her boyfriend and his friend, his crew. So, we overlooked it. And until one day my victim, Anthony, which I didn't know his name at the time. It wasn't any personal relationship, but I was on a motorcycle, riding on a motorcycle.
Yeah, tell us about this.
I had a XL 250 Honda, and I was riding on it in the vicinity of a lounge called Omniview Lounge, in the restaurant that my friend Mike owned. My bike cut off, so I was doing everything to crank it back up. So people gathered around that knew me would, tell me try different things, crank it, try the throttle, this and that. And a guy I didn't know, grabbed the bike and went just showing me, and I said, hold it, wait a minute. I said, I don't know you like that, don't, and the victim and two other guys, then they approached me and pulled out weapons and said I disrespected their friend. And I was like, what?
But at the same time, you were very popular in your neighborhood of Overtown. So there was a lot of other people there because they were initially trying to help you.
Right.
And then these guys came up.
Right.
And that's when the trouble started.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and when they pulled out their firearms, my victim, Anthony, he grabbed me by, I had a bunch of jewelry on, gold chains, rope chains. And he grabbed me by it and was holding me and, pointing the gun in my direction. So people in the crowd telling me, what's going on? What you doing? And he was saying, he disrespect my friend and this and that. So one of his girlfriend's friends came up and she was like, let him go. And so when he turned back to talk to him, that was my opportunity to get away. I wasn't going to wait around and see, what was happening. So I held onto my jewelry, snatched it away, and it popped, and I was able to get through the crowd. And would you believe these three guys were shooting in the crowd at me? Especially him.
I mean, it's a miracle nobody got hit.
No one was hit. Thank God for that. And I was able to get away. And so
on foot.
Yeah, I ran. So, my thing was, okay, it's got to get him back. So
but wait a second. So now, you actually get away. You had to leave your motorcycle there because you were in fear of your life.
Right.
And somebody eventually goes back and gets your motorcycle and brings it to wherever you can get it.
Right. They bring it to me.
So now, but now I think there was another episode about 2, 3, 4 weeks later.
Right.
This is when another close call. This time you're at the intersection of 11th Street and 2nd Avenue in Miami, and you pull up to a red light in your Buick Skylark. What happens?
And so, usually when, most people have the experience when you pull up to a red light and you look, you see a car next to you, you will look, and it was the same guys in the car, the same guys that shot at me, and they came out and they began firing again. I had to leave the car, exit the passenger side, and run to get away again. So now I'm furious. I'm like, it's on.
Wait a minute, back up a second. You pull up, you're in your car, and all of a sudden these three guys, they just get out of their vehicle and they just open fire on you in your car. That's a miracle you're not hit.
Exactly.
So you duck down, you get out the other side of the car.
Yes.
You leave your car in the middle of the intersection.
Left it there.
Probably got 10 bullet holes in it. And where'd you go?
I circled around 10th Street, and I came back down the opposite way. So it was on 2nd Avenue. So I circled the block on 11th Street till I got to 10th Street, and I came back heading towards 8th Street, and I ran to the area that was most familiar with me. And I got away again. That was the second time.
Were they coming after you? They were. No. Were they, or they just happened to fall upon you on that day? You think?
I couldn't say it was just, in the streets is when I see you thing,
Mhm.
So that's what it basically was. And they saw me because, again, he had a girlfriend in the area. So that time I decided that I'm gonna stop playing with this guy.
Do you have any idea? I mean, this all sort of started when you're just trying to fix your motorcycle. You're not bothering anybody.
Mhm.
Do you have any idea why these guys were trying to kill you?
I could speculate, and for years
Right.
I laid back and I thought about this stuff, and I'm not justifying what I did. I'm not saying in any facet that what I did was right. Now I understand that what I did was wrong. But at the time I thought, that, hey, street code, I'm an even score.
Did and this is probably a stupid question, but did it dawn on you, or did you think probably it's not common to do that? Well, just go to the police and tell them these guys are trying to kill
Absolutely
me.
not.
It just wasn't
No
your
way.
culture at the time.
No way. And I mean, it's still the culture, not the culture today. I mean, there's a slogan in society in our neighborhoods, Overtown, Liberty City, these type of places, Opelika, Carroll City, what they call Miami Gardens now, stop snitching.
Oh.
You can't, you can't do that.
All right. So now twice now, these guys have tried to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And now you say, all right, that's it. That's enough. You're mad. You're out for blood.
Mm-hmm.
So you and your crew
Mm-hmm.
are saying, we're going to go find these guys. So you go through Liberty City, you go through Opelika looking for these guys.
Mm-hmm. Riding, looking for them. Mm-hmm.
Now there's a third incident where you're on your way to a girl's house up on 22nd Avenue in Miami.
And 103rd.
And again, you pull up to a light, you look to your left, you see these guys, you look to to the other side, there's an Amoco station.
Mhm.
What happened? One of the guys gets out of the car and puts his hands up. What happened?
Saying he wants to talk to me. It's Anthony. Saying he wanted, man, I want to talk to you, man. I need help. And first chance I get, I hit it right, cut through the Amoco station, get on 103rd, and I'm out of there. So I'm like, it's this gone far enough. So from that point, at that point, I didn't carry a gun every day. So from that point, that third incident, I was carrying a gun every day.
Because you didn't know. This guy put his hands up, but you don't know if he was there to kill you. You didn't know.
I'm thinking he's baiting me, to get out the car or whatever, since he missed me the two other times. So
He's tried twice already, right?
I'm not going to take the chance.
So that was the third episode.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So here we go. One, this is a big deal in your life.
Mm-hmm.
2 months later, you're in your neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
and you're in front of a very popular restaurant called the Open Cafe.
Yes.
What happens?
He comes walking up.
Anthony.
Yes. And so what happens is two sides. They have a side door and a front door, right? So I'm in the front and I go around the corner and where I could see straight down 11th Street. He's coming walking up and I'm like,
Is
this
that him?
can't be who I think it is, And the moment we locked eyes, we were maybe 12 to 13 feet away. About the height of a basketball goal, about 10, 12, 13 feet away.
Mm-hmm.
And both of us are reaching. And I'm coming up first. And when I put out our waist, I pull my gun out and I'm running at him, because this is it,
Right. You want to eliminate this guy.
Yeah.
This guy's tried to kill you 3 times.
In my mind, I'm saying this is done.
Your adrenaline's rushing, all that stuff, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, and
He knew you got the draw on him. He put his hands up.
yeah, then he put his hands up and like, hey, I've been trying to talk to you. And I was like, no, it ain't,
So what happened?
So I shot him. I think the autopsy showed I hit him in the hand. The first shot, I hit him in the hand, and then the rest to his body. And when he hit the ground, I put the last one in his head.
And then you just kept going.
Kept moving.
Where'd you go?
Ran back to my street where I was staying at.
It's funny. As I listen to this story, it's hard for me to believe that you're the same guy that I met in 2015 at the Corrections Transition Program, because that was a lifetime ago. You were probably a very different person. So talk a little bit about the person, the change you were and who you are today, Because you probably can't believe that you
Yeah, I
did that.
can't. When I think about it, Chris, I'm amazed. And it's funny that you mentioned that since I'm down here in Miami and I'm actually living in Tampa now. As I come through my neighborhood and I look and I said, this was my world right here. And I could see that life is much bigger and greater than just this little space that I come from, or that I basically was reared in. And I see a lot of the different things that I've done in the past, and I just saying to myself, it's crazy, was I really that guy? And I actually was. Culture, I want to say, is very influential. You see it now with and I don't just want to blame it on music, but in the rap music, the culture is promoting, a lot of negativity. And so those were the things that was on my mind from those times watching Miami Vice and wanting to be this big drug lord. And I didn't understand that there was a whole nother aspect to it, and that's the violence of it. It's not just about party, hang out with your friends and go to the club. It's a violent aspect of it. And
Maybe we'll kill that one. Yeah, let's kill that right now.
So
Troy, let me ask you a question. If you could be in a room and talk to a room full of Troy Martins today, all 16, 17 at-risk youth, given what you've learned and what you've experienced, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think the best advice that I could give is something that we propagate and promote in CTP, which is Correction Transition Program, that you're very familiar with as being a board member. If you have to make a decision about anything, first thing is to consider, is it going to hurt you to do this particular thing? And then the second thing to consider, if it's not going to hurt you, is it going to hurt anyone else?
That's right.
And if you reach the conclusion that it is the either one, question number one or question number two, don't do it. Don't do it. It's very simple. Before I was paroled out, the warden at Everglades had this sign painted on the wall in our dormitory, and it says, "Do the right thing, even when you don't want to." Right. That's another slogan that I would promote. I would tell at-risk youth. In fact, that's one of the things that I do in Tampa is I talk to at-risk youth, along with feeding the homeless.
Right.
There's a job called Feeding Tampa Bay. Right. That they feed the homeless at Hillsborough Community College every Saturday morning at the Del Mabry campus. And I go there from time to time, volunteer and assist with that. Right.
Now, hold on. I'll get to your transition in a second, but I want to go back because we're not finished with your story. Because what happened was 2 days after the shooting. Hold on. 2 days after the shooting, the police are investigating. Right. And they go to the murder scene and they find a guy that I think you remember, and he wants to get the $1,000, tip. Right. So he contacts the police for that on that $1,000 tip line. Yes. And he gives the name and location of one of your crew members. Yes. Yes. Talk about that. What happens?
So what happened was this guy who did it, Alfredo Rodriguez, he was the ex-boyfriend of an ex-girlfriend of mine. So my ex-girlfriend of mine, her sister's ex-boyfriend. And
they were at the restaurant, or they were in the front with a night that
so this was everybody knew about what I did, about the event, and it was like me and my crew had got these guys back, got him and his crew back, which was specifically in this instance me and him. I got him back. So guys knew in the neighborhood, what people knew in the neighborhood, what had transpired. So this guy, Alfredo, was smoking crack, and the guy that he told on in my entourage used to mishandle him, used to treat him bad. So when he found out about what had transpired, he called the police to get a tip, and he gave up information on one of my guys.
Your crew member.
Right. So
Who he didn't like.
exactly.
Right.
Right. So
The
thinking he could get a reward, because when they published that, on Crime Stoppers and
Yes.
stuff,
Right.
they say call and you could get up to $1,000
Right.
and this and that.
So the police contact your crew member.
Right. So
What happens?
So they went to the location where this guy was at, and they apprehended him with drugs and paraphernalia and a firearm, and they had a discussion, and it says that they told him if he would take them to where I was or give me up, they would let him go.
How old was this crew member?
He was 18.
He was 18. So they go and they find him. He's got a gun. He's got a lot of drugs. He's got way too much cash for an 18-year-old.
Right.
And he gives you up.
Yes, he did.
Okay, go ahead.
So and he actually brought him to where I was, and I was arrested at that point.
Where were you?
And still over town.
In an apartment?
Yeah, in the apartment.
And the police showed up, and what
Kicked the
happened?
door in.
They kicked the door in.
Yeah, arrested me, along with two other guys who it was their apartment. So they let them go at the police station, because they was interested in finding me for first-degree murder.
What happened to the rule on the street where you don't snitch on the other guy?
Yeah, that's a big thing, and that was one of the things that guys been talking about since I got out. Had I seen him or whatever the case, and I didn't see him. He's no longer in state. He went on to go to federal prison later on, and so I talked to him maybe a year ago. Somebody got in contact with him and let him know that I was out, and he was out. So when I told him I forgive him.
Yeah, when we spoke at Everglades Correctional Institution, I asked you that, and you said, no, you understood. He was in trouble, and he wanted to get out of trouble.
Exactly.
So you really don't have any animosity to the guy that gave you up.
Absolutely not. In fact, I want to say that he helped rescue me from myself.
Yeah.
Because I was a public threat, and not only that, a threat to myself.
Yeah.
So did they arrest you on the spot and charge that you're under arrest for first-degree murder, or did they wait till you got to the police station?
Right. So what they did is they said they was taking me in custody for questioning, and then once I got to the police station, they said that they had a separate eyewitness, and they showed him some photographs, and he picked out. They took a picture of me at the City Mine police station, and they showed him some photographs, and they came back 5 minutes later and said he selected my photograph as the shooter that night. And so at that point I was arrested, taken to the Miami-Dade County Jail.
And how long were you at the jail before your trial?
A little over a year.
Is that normal? It takes that long?
Yeah, generally for a murder case. At that time, now I heard it's 4 or 5 years.
Was the death penalty on the table?
Yes, it was.
Did they offer you a less number of years to plead guilty?
They had heard all the information what occurred, and the prosecutor offered me 20 years. Yeah, but I felt that, hey, if I'd have been dead, I wouldn't be getting 20 years. So I didn't feel like I deserved to do 20 years in prison.
You felt like you were just defending yourself.
Exactly.
Preventing yourself from getting
according
murdered.
to the street code, not legally. Now,
Yes.
I learned in prison.
Now you understand.
Right. That, but as a 19-year-old just turning 20, I didn't, I was like, no, man, no, 20 years.
You actually didn't understand the consequences of this. Is that correct?
Well, the consequences of
killing him.
The criminal, well, to a degree, I would say, yeah, I didn't.
I mean, you thought, hey, these people are trying to kill me.
Exactly.
This in a sort of way, this is self-defense.
Right. And so in a childish way, it was like he shot at me first.
Right.
So I'm shoot second, and I'm going to be the guy who gets it done. So which it was criminal thinking and wrong. Today I understand that, but that's what my mindset was at that time.
Is that the way the life at that time, and maybe even today,
Absolutely.
on the street,
Absolutely.
in Overtown and places like Liberty City, is that the way it is
still?
It is universal. It's universal in the United States, in what we call the hood, in the ghetto, impoverished areas. I mean, somebody shoot at you, you're not gonna go tell the police. In fact, they had a movie about that in the late 80s, early 90s called Juice. featuring Tupac Shakur.
Yeah, I remember.
And the guy who went on became a famous actor. His name is Omar Epps.
Epps, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that was about, the same thing. That's a common practice throughout most of the major cities. When you have these feuds going on, it could be over the smallest thing. Sometimes it's about a girl. Sometimes it's about the way you looked at me. Sometimes it's you stepped on my shoe by accident.
Yeah, it was the way he touched your motorcycle. Right?
It wasn't even him.
Yeah.
It was another guy that was
right.
It was a friend of his.
Right.
So, and it baffled me for years. But I believe that all things work for good, and I don't want to promote my beliefs today, but I believe that all things work together for the good of those who love God, and the call according to his purpose. I believe there's a purpose in all of our lives. And, sometimes people go through different things to find out whatever that purpose is.
Yeah,
if you had taken 20 years rather than the life sentence, how many years do you think you would have spent as opposed to 33?
Well, at that time, they had what's called 1/3 off. So as soon as you come through the reception center, which I happened to go through with South Florida, was brand new, maybe a year old at the time. So they would take 1/3 off your sentence, whatever the right. total was, 1/3 would automatically come off what you call statutory.
So now you're down to 14.
Right. And then you have monthly game time at that time, which you don't have anymore. What they call administrative game time was automatic 60 days each month, as long as you didn't get a DR, which stands for discipline report. Right. And then additional 20 days incentive game time for working. So each day each month you would get 80 days off your sentence. So in 1 year, you would have reduced your sentence by 8 months. So every 1 year you do, they would take off 8 months.
So you probably would have done maybe 7-8 years if you had taken
in
the
that
20.
range. In that range.
So all right. So now the jury finds you guilty of first-degree murder. Did the judge sentence you right away, or was there a separate sentencing hearing?
So what I went to was in first-degree murder was called a bifurcated trial, which means two-part: the guilt or innocent phase, and then the sentencing phase. So I got found guilty on, I think it was like the 11th, and then they had the second phase for sentencing like a week later. And the judge, shout outs to Norman Gerstein. I don't know if he's still around.
His name's on buildings, but I don't know if he's around.
I don't think so.
That's Richard Gerstein.
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
Okay.
I don't know if they're kin or not, if they're related or not. So what happened was the prosecutor, she went, and I heard she's a judge now, but she went all the way to the judge was like, "Are you going to actually seek the death penalty in this case?" And she was like, "Yes, I am." She said the state has the right to seek it, and she sought it. But the jury unanimously, because what they do is they make a recommendation to the judge as to what the sentence should be. And at that time, it was death or life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. And the jury, all 14 members, recommended that I be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 25 years. And the judge immediately sentenced me to that.
So you're 19 years old.
I turned 20 in the county jail. So.
Okay, so you're 20 years old. You're standing in front of a judge, and he says, "I sentence you to life in prison, 25 years mandatory." You're 20 years old. Mm-hmm. What was going through your mind?
Man, is he for real? I mean, that's worse than the 20 years, that I was offered.
Right.
Yes, it is.
Right, sure.
And I'm like, I can't win for losing in this situation, and what I didn't understand was that offer, because the prosecutor had the facts of the case and understood. Generally, that's not the case where they say, okay, here's 20 years and they have, this type of case, a first-degree murder case. So, but I didn't understand that the plea bargain was what they call a plea of convenience, because they understood the facts of the case.
Mm-hmm.
You spend 33 years. So you go to prison, you're 20 years old, you go to an adult prison. Mm-hmm. You spent 33 years in prison, 10 different prisons along the way. Mm-hmm. How did you survive 33 years in prison? Because that itself is quite remarkable.
Well, one of the things is I boxed pretty good. We had Gibson Park, which before I came to prison. And so in prison, after South Florida Reception Center, which I remained like a month, I went to an institution called Glades CI, Belgrades. I did 6 months there, and while there, my first 6 months, I met a guy who was a coach, a recreational coach, and he was into what they call now MMA, but back then we called it kickboxing.
Right.
And, his name is Jack Emanuel, and guys call him Snake. And he began to train me. Was one of the guys that began to train me. When he seen, I knew a little something about the speed bag and things like that. He began to train me. So I didn't have any problems in that regard.
You told me the three most violent prisons that you were at, and you didn't really have a problem in prison because you could box and you could take care of yourself. But you told me the three most violent prisons were Florida State Prison, Martin, and Okeechobee. Why were those three so violent? Like, how would you describe those? I
mean, again, like the neighborhoods, it was the culture of those particular prisons where all this machoism, you had to prove, that you didn't take any crap. And so it's a constant sense of urgency to prove a point to someone. So if this dude disrespect me in the child hall, he was looking at me, and, what we call the East unit. He eased me, so I got to straighten Chris tomorrow, man. He eased me at dinner. So you go to the rec yard looking for this in the morning, and you got guys that's supporting, the foolishness, especially if you're a name brand guy, guys looking to make a name for themselves. And yeah, I'm gonna go step down on Chris Wolfe tomorrow, and
right.
And it's promoted.
A lot of weapons in those jails.
Yeah, it was. At that time, it was.
How did you make money in prison? Seems like every guy that comes on this show talks about how they made money, loan sharking, stealing food from the canteens or the kitchens. Selling drugs. How did you make money?
Well, I still did some of the stuff that I initially did in society.
Selling drugs?
Yeah, for maybe my first 10 years I did that. But generally, aside from doing that, I worked as a law clerk, which means I worked in the law library, and I helped guys because I understood, I had a life sentence, and I would have gave an arm and a leg to get out. And so, a lot of guys were in that same situation. And unlike me, they didn't have the advantage of being taught by an older guy in the Dade County Jail about law, the laws and statutes and the case law. So yeah. I helped guys,
I wrote down that you becoming a law clerk was a turning point in your life.
It was.
So, talk about, how did you become a law clerk? And then how did you help the men in prison?
Okay, so while I was in Dade County Jail, a lot of the older guys that had been to prison and was out and was back in the county jail tell me, you need to go work on your case. Look up your case. Go to the law library. So I went up there one day and I meet this guy. He was a law clerk in prison. He had did 10 years back in prison, and he was back in the county jail on what you call the evidentiary hearing for a Rule 3.850 motion. His name was Melvie Tucker, and he kind of took me under his wing. So one day we was in the law library on the 7th floor in the county jail, and guys who knew him from prison, you'd be surprised at the amount of recidivism. Guys that had been to prison and were out and back in, so they knew him from prison. He was still in prison. He was still a ward of the state. He was just back going to court.
Right.
And they was asking him, because he was a law clerk in prison, and they knew that, Melvie, help me with this, help me with that. Some guys would, man, I need a letter to my lawyer. And he said, write it up, draft it up, and I'll type it for you. And so what happened one day, I was on a typewriter.
You learned how to type, right?
Yeah. In junior high school, I had typing in the 7th grade.
Right.
So, and he saw me. He said, what you doing? I said, I'm typing a letter to my lawyer. He was like, go ahead, let me see. So when I did, he said, you know the home road keys and everything, which I did. And so he said, when you get through, let me know. So when I got through typing my letter to my lawyer, he gave me somebody's draft and he said, type that for me. And I did in like 30 minutes, which seemed like a long time to type a letter. But for that environment, it was pretty quick.
Right.
So I could, in a 3-hour span, I could do 6-7 letters, type guy. So he started getting the officer when he come to work, hey, go down and get Troy. So,
Gotcha.
So that's how I got in like that.
Are prisons as violent today as they were when you went in back in '86?
It's really, that's a tough question, Chris. I would say
Have gangs had an effect on that?
definitely. Because so when I went in, the guys were more the prison, the environment was rougher. But now these gangs is a whole different level, because in the 80s and in the 90s, it was like turf where you from. The guys from Miami hung out together, the guys from Orlando or Jacksonville, and we were kind of like against each other. If you got into it with somebody from Miami, you had to deal with the Miami guys and vice versa. But now with these gangs, it's mostly younger kids, younger adults in their late teens, early 20s, and they're from all over the place. And so you go through something with one of them, it's all of them. And they're pretty much looking to make a mark on older guys, and then they're doing the gang initiations. Like, this guy want to get into this gang, so he might tell him, go stab that old guy and,
Right.
go rob this man at the canteen or whatever the case may be.
Just for the initiation.
Exactly. So, so that brings a whole different aspect to it.
You also said that white guys get tried
Mhm.
more than blacks and Hispanics.
At that time, yes.
Is it still that way?
For the most part, I would say not necessarily, because is whoever has a few soups, you know what I mean? You can buy the guys on your side.
Right.
You know?
And you also said that rape still goes on, but it's less than it used to be, because now guys really get in trouble for it. You can get
Absolutely.
you get criminal charges.
Right. So they have PREA and this stuff. So it's kind of like a protective clause that they have now. So that's not really a big thing anymore. I would imagine that it's still, prevalent, but not to the degree it was when there was no repercussions. But go to confinement for 30 or 60 days, get out and be doing it all over again.
So 2015, all of a sudden now you're transferred to the Corrections Transition Program at Everglades Correctional Institution.
Mm-hmm.
So you see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
Like you think you're going to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And you meet Dr. Regina Sheeran,
Mm-hmm.
who is the co-creator of the Corrections Transition Program. She was a magnificent woman, as you would agree.
Absolutely.
Tell me about your first encounter with her. What did she say to you?
So some guys had told her about my past in prison, the things I've done. But the guys who told her about this stuff hadn't seen me in like maybe 20 years. And so she says, Troy, I heard about you. I said, okay, doc. She says, we're going to be watching you. I said, okay. I said, that's a good thing, doc. And she said, that's a good thing. Why would you say that? I said, because you're going to like what you see. Yeah. And since that time, that's been me and Doc, we on point.
And I would have asked you, what was the one thing that you learned from the Corrections Transition Program that you will never forget? And you did say it earlier, if you want to repeat that.
Yes.
That is a great point. Go ahead.
Any decision that you have to make, ask yourself first, is it going to hurt me? And then, if not, the second question is it going to hurt anyone else? And if it is, the answer to either one of those questions is yes, don't do it. Don't do it.
Pretty simple.
Yeah, but not easy.
Right.
It's not easy. Doing the right thing generally, when you were not accustomed to, is not.
That's a very hard thing.
Yes, it is.
But the reason I said that you becoming a law clerk was a turning point in your life, especially in prison, was because you seemed like you hit a point where you just said you wanted to do something with your life, and you never really got any delinquency reports in prison, did you?
So believe it or not, I did. I had a few, but for a guy who was almost into everything, except I need to mention, except homosexuality. No offense to anyone. I had 11 DRs, which the average guy coming into prison like me at 20 didn't care if they had 1 million of them. But I always set standards in a high bar for myself. I mean, why live in a box when I'm already in an incarcerated setting? And because there's no fun back there. Right. I mean, they bring your food to you, and you would think, oh, they bring your food to you, but it's not the same thing as being in chow hall or a cafeteria with 1,800 other guys. When you say, hey, you don't eat the potatoes, or a guy's giving you food and this and that. In that box is you generally, especially in places like Rayford, you're in there by yourself, and what that one tray they give you is all you're gonna get.
Yeah, not a lot of human interaction there.
No, it's not.
November 19th, 2019. I know you know this date for the rest of your life. You actually left the prison on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yes.
You left Everglades Correctional Institution. You were paroled. What was the first thing you did?
I hugged my brother, my little brother, who's the youngest. My mom's 11 children. He's in law enforcement in South Carolina. He's a military veteran for over 25 years. He came to pick me up.
Oh, God bless him.
Yeah, he came in, and thank you for your service, Rob, if you're watching. And he came to pick me up, and I hugged him. But Anthony Venezia was actually out there waiting because he picked up Van Hook.
Yeah, we're just trying to get him on the show too.
Yeah, so they videoed me walking out, and I hugged my brother, and I'm like, man, it's good to see you guys. So I called a friend who's been a big supporter of mine, and I called her right fast and let her know. I said, I just walked out the gate, and she was ecstatic. And I was like, wow, this is it. I mean, from the clothes to everything.
Yeah. So now you're at Noah's Transition House under the leadership of the wonderful Tony Parker.
Yes.
And you've been there for a little over a year.
Yes.
And how long will you be at the halfway house?
So right now I'm waiting on an apartment. It was supposed to be getting renovated. So I'm waiting on that process. But I think I'm gonna start looking elsewhere because I know I'm ready to move on to the next phase of this journey, and I'm looking forward to it.
How much do you pay every month at the halfway house?
$400 a month.
Okay. And how many people live at the halfway house?
So right now in the house we have 8.
And how many bedrooms?
So it's 3 bedrooms.
A little tight.
With it's 3 bedrooms with 2 bunk beds in each. So it can actually, the house that I'm in can actually hold 12.
And you have a job.
Yes, I do.
Tell us about your job.
So I work at a place called Fresco Foods, which sells breakfast and dinners to Publix, Alberts, Albertsons. And so what I do is when the plates, after the meal is completed, they give them to me. We put them in a blast where they're chilled. And then I run them through a machine to seal them, airtight. And then they're labeled and they're boxed, palletized, put on pallets and taken to trucks to be shipped.
I have a question about the halfway house, if I could. Is the halfway house, you think it's a benefit to you coming out? I mean,
absolutely. It's a part of the transition process. Because going from an environment where I'm dealing with 1,800 people,
right,
to even if you say the number 12, that's a lot of people to be in the house.
Yeah.
But it's better than 1,800.
Right.
Then we have a kitchen, living room, bathrooms, and and it's more personalized, as opposed to
and maybe if you had left that 1,800 people and were all by yourself in a little studio or something, might be kind of drastic, right?
Yes. And in fact, one of the guys, and I want to give him a shout out, Alvin Lewis, one of the senior coordinators in our program. Absolutely, when I was paroled. He does a program. He used to do a class called
parole planning.
There you go, parole planning. And he shows this movie a lot. It's called Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah,
great movie.
Yeah, we've seen it.
And you see the guy Brooks after 50 years.
Exactly.
He didn't even want to get out.
Yeah.
Right. He thought about killing somebody so he can stay. Right. So, but when he eventually got out, he couldn't adjust. He couldn't adapt.
Exactly.
When he left, there was a horse in the carriage. Now there were cars. He was almost getting hit in the street. So basically, what the transition house does is other guys like you, they get to hold your hand and show you, because we can identify with each other more than your family, your friends, your children, anybody.
Exactly.
Right. So we know what you're going through. We know what you need. We know the process. And the thing is, another thing I want to say is trust the process. So as you've seen in the movie Shawshank Redemption, Morgan Freeman, after a while, after 40 years, right, was working in the same place, lived in the same halfway house as Brooks. And he seen a gun in the pawn shop. Right. He said, when I get my paycheck, I'm gonna go buy this gun, rob the store, and go back to what I know.
Right.
So he remembered that the guy Red had told him, if you ever get a chance, go to this specific location. And he did, and he found the money and the letter.
Right. Yeah.
And so he said, well, since I'm going back and I'm violated anyway, I might as well take a chance on life.
Right.
And he left. Right.
Now, Dr. Sheeran is always big on you guys giving back to society after you
Yeah.
get out. Now, I know that, as you mentioned, with Tony Venecia, you're feeding the homeless in Tampa.
Yeah.
And you worked at as a security guard at a Black Heritage
Oh,
event.
yeah, that was.
But the big thing is that religion is very important to you.
Mhm.
And you're at St. John's Cathedral with Pastor Dwight Newkirk, and you're an assistant usher there, and you give money every week to the church.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yes. So one of the things I want to say concerning the security guard, it was far-fetched for me. One of the guys there, again, who was in Noah's house with us, he was born and raised in Tampa by the name of Gerald Cheatham, and his one of his pastors has a security guard company, and he says that he needed 3 people to work. So Gerald recruited myself along with Darrell Smith, who we call Cowboy, and we worked this event called the Black Heritage Festival in Tampa, the 20th annual one, which was in 2020, January. And we were security guards with our security guard shirts on, and we would just laugh. Every time we see each other, we would laugh. People were like, what's the inside joke? And we were like, man, look at life. And one of the things that I did there is I had the opportunity to, an older lady brought me a wallet. And she said, security, I found this. So I said, okay. And I decided, right, I took it to the guy who hired us. His name is Andrew. Drew, I took it to him and I said, can you take me to a police? I mean, not that I didn't trust him. So I wanted to put it in the police's hands, which is what I did. And they were blown away because the man's credit cards, his license, his money, everything was still there. And they was like, who is this guy? So, and I said that one of the things that I learned is to do the right thing. If I lost my wallet, I would want somebody.
And they match the wallet up with the person who lost it.
So
now, hold on one second, because we're out of time.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you one more quick question.
Okay.
What's next for Troy Martin?
Moving up in life, whatever that it entails. So I have a few goals, long-term goals, short-term goals that I want to accomplish, but I'm gonna take them one step at a time, one day at a time. That's the way I got through 33 years, was one day at a time.
Well said, and we hope you can come back to this show another time.
Thanks.
Andy, last comments for today's show?
This guy blew me away today.
Yeah.
He's smart. He's articulate.
Absolutely.
He seems to have a good sense of where he is in his life. I'm blown away by you today, Troy. Really. God bless you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, and we hope you can come back again. Thank you all so much for tuning in for another episode of Men Going Home. Again, thank you. Please join us next week for another riveting episode of Men Going Home with Chris Wolfe. And thank you again. Enjoy your evening. Thank you very much.